Times Square used to feel like the center of the world, the place where New York showed off its energy, its chaos, its promise. Neon lights stacked on neon lights, crowds shoulder to shoulder, street performers, Broadway marquees glowing through the night. It wasn't polished and it wasn't comfortable, but it felt alive. For decades, tourists didn't come to Times Square because it was relaxing. They came because it felt electric. Today, that feeling is fading, and more visitors are quietly admitting something they never expected to say out loud. Times Square isn't magical anymore. The biggest change is the crowd itself. Times Square is still packed, but the energy is different. It feels transactional, not spontaneous. People aren't wandering in awe. They're funneling through security barriers, dodging costume characters, demanding tips, and standing in long lines for experiences that feel mass-produced. What once felt chaotic in a thrilling way now feels managed, controlled, and exhausting. Visitors describe it as overwhelming but not exciting, crowded but strangely empty of personality. The lights are brighter than ever, yet the place feels flatter. A major reason is cost. Times Square has become one of the most expensive pieces of real estate on Earth, and tourists feel that pressure instantly. A simple meal can cost double what it would just a few blocks away. Chain restaurants dominate, charging premium prices for average food, because they know first-time visitors will pay it once. Broadway tickets that used to feel like a splurge now feel unreachable for many families. Even basic things like coffee, snacks, or souvenirs come with Times Square pricing, and tourists leave feeling less entertained and more exploited. What used to feel like a celebration of excess now feels like a constant money grab. Then there's the loss of authenticity. Times Square was never subtle, but it used to feel uniquely New York. Over the years, it's been scrubbed, sanitized, and corporatized. Local businesses were pushed out, replaced by the same global brands tourists can find in any major city. The billboards are no longer advertising culture or theater. They're advertising tech companies, streaming services, and luxury brands. It's impressive, but it's also generic. Visitors increasingly say the same thing. It doesn't feel like New York. It feels like an airport shopping terminal with brighter lights. The experience itself has become fragmented. Tourists arrive expecting a destination, but quickly realize there's not much to actually do there beyond taking photos. You stand, you look up, you take a picture, and then you wonder what's next. Street performers are heavily regulated, seating areas feel temporary and uncomfortable, and lingering too long becomes tiring rather than fun. The magic used to come from unpredictability. Now everything feels scheduled, restricted, and optimized for crowd control rather than wonder. Safety and the comfort play a role too. While Times Square is heavily policed, many visitors still describe it as stressful rather than welcoming. Aggressive panhandling, costume characters demanding tips, and constant noise create tension instead of excitement. Families with kids often say they expected something fun and iconic, but instead felt rushed, overstimulated, and on edge. The irony is that in trying to make Times Square safer and more controlled, the city stripped away the rough edges that gave it character, leaving behind something that feels hollow. Social media has also quietly changed everything. Times Square looks incredible on a screen. Drone shots, wide angles, perfectly timed photos make it seem larger than life. But when tourists arrive, reality doesn't match the fantasy. The crowds are tighter, the space is smaller, and the experience less cinematic. People come chasing a viral moment and leave disappointed when they realize everyone else is chasing the same photo. The result is a place optimized for images, not memories. Another uncomfortable truth is that tourists are better informed now. They know New York has more to offer. Neighborhoods like Brooklyn, Harlem, Soho, and Queens feel more authentic, more interesting, and often more affordable. Visitors are discovering that the best food, culture, and energy exist far from Times Square. Many now treat it as a quick stop instead of a destination, something you see once and move on from. That shift matters because Times Square was built on repeat awe. Once the wonder is gone, there's nothing left to sustain it. Locals have felt this for years. For New Yorkers, Times Square stopped being magical a long time ago. It became a place to avoid, not enjoy. But when tourists start feeling the same way, the illusion breaks. The city can keep the lights on, keep the ads rotating, keep the crowds moving, but it can't force people to feel wonder. That has to come naturally, and Times Square has made itself too corporate, too expensive, and too predictable for that to happen anymore. What's happening now isn't a collapse, but a slow erosion. Times Square isn't empty, it isn't abandoned, and it isn't going anywhere, but it's losing its emotional pull. Tourists aren't leaving saying, "That was unforgettable." They're leaving saying, "I'm glad I saw it, but once was enough." In tourism, that's a dangerous sentence. Once a place becomes a checkbox instead of a dream, its power fades quickly. Another factor that quietly drains the magic is how disconnected Times Square feels from the rest of the city. It exists in its own bubble, insulated from everyday New York life. You can spend hours there without hearing a real conversation, without seeing how people actually live, without feeling the rhythm that defines the city beyond the billboard. For first-time visitors, that isolation creates confusion. They came to experience New York, but instead they experienced a manufactured version of it, one that feels frozen in place while the rest of the city evolves. There's also fatigue setting in. Global tourism has exploded, and many travelers have seen places like Times Square replicated elsewhere. Cities around the world now build their own LED districts, entertainment zones, and branded experiences. When everything starts to look the same, nothing feels special. Times Square used to be the blueprint. Now it feels like one version of a concept that's been copied too many times. The uniqueness that once justified the crowds and chaos has been diluted. The hardest part to admit is that Times Square didn't lose its magic overnight. It traded it away piece by piece. For higher rents, for safer optics, for corporate stability, for predictable profits, and in doing so it became something efficient but soulless, impressive but uninspiring. The lights still shine, the crowds still gather, and the photos still get taken, but the feeling that once made people fall in love with Times Square is quietly disappearing. And that's the truth tourists don't want to admit. Times Square didn't fail because people stopped caring. It failed because it stopped giving them a reason to care in the first place.